the Process Podcast, breaking down the daily habits, processes, and tools of high achievers. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilson.
Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome to the Process Podcast. This is your host, Brad Wilson. And I just want to take a second to say that if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe and rate this show. This is the easiest and most powerful thing you can do to support the show and ensure it continues on at least until the mid-2200s, if not even longer than that. Today's guest on the Process Podcast is Romanella. Rocky's the former president of retail operations in the U.S. for UPS, which I don't know if you've heard or not, but just like Ron Burgandy, it's kind of a big deal. He's also the former CEO of Unitek, and more recently is an author, keynote speaker, and founder of 360 Management Services. Quite simply, he's a highly successful, battle-tested leader who believes in the respectful and thoughtful treatment of everyone he works with. In our interview, I asked Rocky about the actionable steps a tiny company can take in order to collaborate or land a contract with a massive company like UPS, mentorship, or more specifically, how to acquire and use mentors in an effective way, what Rocky would think about and spend his time and energy on if he were just a young buck starting today but still had his leadership and business knowledge, his go-to books on leadership, and much, much more. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Rocky Romanella. Good morning. How are we doing, sir?
Good morning, Brad. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Pumped full of coffee. Feeling pretty good.
Got my Starbucks here as well, so I'm ready to go.
Very nice. Very nice. So to start things out, could you tell me about one of your mentors and how that relationship got started?
Well, a gentleman, a professional, Ed Chip, rest his soul. He passed away way too young, actually prior to being 55. And, Ed was one of those leaders who was ahead of his time. The questions that he asked, he was a very thoughtful leader. And I remember sitting there one day thinking, how does he think of these things? And, what's his thought process in terms of questions? And he was one of the first people that I worked for or worked around or worked with that, asked us questions like, well, what do you think the competition's doing? We were so internally focused as a company at that time. We were very proud of our engineering prowess, very proud of the way we built systems and how we engineered every job at UPS, and so we were very proud of that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he was the first one that kind of challenged us or challenged me to kind of look outside of what we currently do and wonder, well, A, what does our competitors do? And B, what do you think the customer thinks our right answer should be here, right? And so I think that was the person who really kind of challenged us to think outside of our comfort zone and think outside of what we currently do. And he also was an individual who was, I would say, a people person before it was fashionable.
Where do you think he got his leadership skills from? Were they self-learned? Did he find information in books? Did he have a mentor himself?
I'm sure he had a mentor himself, but I think Ed was well read. He also was an individual who was one of those, you always hear that person that's a lifelong learner. I mean, he read, magazines as well as books and, was very much into, learning and making sure that we were always learning and we were always challenging it ourselves to kind of look past our internal, learnings and to make sure we knew what was going on around us, to be self-aware, I would say, outside of, our organization. And so he was that kind of individual. I just think he was a thoughtful person. I mean, that's why I think one of the traits of a leader that I think is so important is thoughtfulness. You think through things. And I think he was one of those individuals who taught me to think through, the circumstances, to try to find out what are some of the unintended consequences that may happen. Everyone always looks at a problem and then comes up with a solution, and they always have the good things that are going to happen. And he would always challenge you, what are some of the unintended consequences? Try to see if you can see what they could be potentially. And you can never account for them all, Brad, but if you at least attempt to understand what they could be, then you're prepared if those things happen. What are your, what's the audibles you're going to call kind of idea.
What are some exercises and actionables that people can implement in their own life to sort of build their empathy?
Well, I think the first thing is that you have to want to be a good listener. I think that's the first thing. The second thing for me was always, I tell people all the time, give me 24 hours. And what I mean by that is I may have an idea or a view of a solution to a problem or a view of the way I think something should happen. And then someone who I trust and someone who works with me that, I've given a tremendous amount of responsibility and authority comes up with a different approach. I always tell them it's, kind of the lesson I learned from one of my son's best coaches. He said, look, I know after the game you're going to be upset about something as a parent, or you're going to think something's not right, and you're going to want to talk to me. Give it 24 hours. If it's still as important to you tomorrow morning as it is right now, well, then we'll have that conversation. And so I kind of implemented that same thing in my work surroundings, that, I would always say, okay, well, let me think about this. And 24 hours later, I'm thinking, well, this is someone I trust. This is someone I give a tremendous amount of authority and respect to. If they think this is the right approach, I can't just pick and choose the things that I'm not going to agree with them on, because so I would say in more than 80% of the cases, I would always come back the next day and say, look, I gave it some thought. You really believe this is the right way to go. You know what? Let's go ahead and do it. And people would realize, just give me 24 hours to kind of think through it and kind of get there. And I always seem to come back to, you know what, this is someone I trust. And if I trust them and I believe in them, then I have to give them the latitude to use their ideas and use their thoughts. And if I don't do that, they're never going to come to me with new ideas and new thoughts. And so I kind of use that 24-hour rule that the coach told us when the kids were little playing in sports, and it seems to have served me well.
Very nice. Do you find that it helps remove some of the emotion out of the equation? Because I know as a kid who grew up playing sports, and I played baseball 6 months out of the year, especially Little League, it's crazy emotional. The parents care more than the kids. So by giving people 24 hours, lets emotions calm down so that you can more rationally think through a situation.
I would think that's an absolute exact way to describe it. I also think it's one of those situations where it gives you a chance. So if you have that kind of rule in your mind, then you don't make statements that you can't back away from. One of the individuals I work for used to always say, never make statements like, for example, the next time this happens, someone's going to be demoted or lose their job, or next time we do this, this is going to happen. Once you make that broad statement, well, now you have to act upon it, right? And so what happens then is you've boxed yourself into a corner. And sometimes there's circumstances that happen that are out of your control. But now you've made this statement publicly. And so for me, that 24-hour rule would be like, okay, well, you know what? Let me think about it. Otherwise, if I'm making the statement like, well, we're never going to do that, then I come back tomorrow morning and it's like, well, I thought about it. We should do it. Then you look like, you kind of can't make a decision. So I think to your point, it takes the emotion out and it leaves you latitude and it leaves you room to make a much better decision. I say all the time, some of the best decisions you make are the ones you don't make.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% in this. There are certainly decisions that I've made in my life that waiting 24 hours was a much better solution rather than being impulsive. And like you said, boxing yourself in, because if you say something and then you don't act on it, you lose credibility. Your words don't mean as much to the people that you're trying to lead, which is obviously a really bad place to be for a leader.
I think the other thing is too, and that's why I always talk about balance. I talk about balance in my book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, and this concept of balanced leadership. It's the same in the decision-making process. There has to be a good place between the person who believes that they have to make every decision immediately, or it's a sign that they're a weak leader, which is certainly not true. And then there's the other side of the equation where, it's analysis paralysis. People can't make a decision. I used to say all the time, especially in large organizations, thank God we're not ambulance drivers. People would be dying left and right, So there's got to be something between the belief that you have to make a decision immediately to the group of people that can't make a decision because they're analyzing. I need one more piece of data and one more thing. Let's get big data. Let's get little data. Let's get data. No, there's got to be something between that and that. And I think that is when there's the appropriate, thoughtful amount of time you take to make a good decision. And to your point, hey, if 24 hours from now, I'm still as upset about that situation, well, then now it's a good time to go talk to the coach. The next day, if I wake up and I still feel strongly about the fact that, I appreciate your opinion. I think that's a good idea. However, we need to go in this direction. Well, then when you have that conversation with the individual, they look at you like, okay, well, at least you gave me the courtesy of the thought. At least you thought through it. If you woke up tomorrow morning and you're still as passionate about doing it this way, I'm with you, because you gave me the courtesy and you gave me the respect to at least listen through and sleep on it. So I think that that's probably the balance you're trying to strike.
If somebody out there wanted to snag their own mentor, whether virtual or in the real world, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think that it's more than just a process of interviewing or thinking about a mentor. I think it really comes down to, the things that you're looking to grow and develop as a person. It's almost like I have to, you're kind of doing that inventory, and you believe you bring certain skills to the table. And I felt like I was one of those, energetic people, high energy, had a good vision of what I was trying to accomplish. But what happened was I also felt like I wasn't well-rounded. What are the things I really need to be that consummate professional that differentiates me from maybe my peers, or, allows me to feel good about the things that I've done? When I look back in my career, what were the things that I achieved tangibly, but what were the intangible things? Was I that type of leader that people, wanted to work with or work for, and they didn't agree with everything, all the decisions I made, but never disagreed enough that they wouldn't want to work for me again? As you're starting to do that self-inventory, what happens then is, or a skill that you think you find those people who you think really do a really good job at it. And to me, someone like Ed or another gentleman I work for, Bud Yard, I mean, these were individuals who I admired something that they did that I wish I could do. And so, or I wish I had that skill. And those are the kinds of individuals that you kind of move towards, because they're good people, and that they have a skill that you yourself need to kind of in your skills inventory, right? I mean, to have someone that you're real good at this and they're real good at that, you could be good friends with them or have a good relationship, but all you're really doing is doing this high-fiving each other. Hey, yeah, you're really good at that. Yeah, I'm really good at that. And it's kind of, well, you're not really learning anything, right? So so sometimes the mentor challenges you, and it's an uncomfortable challenge, but that's a good thing, right? And so you have to be willing to have that uncomfortable challenge. And I think that's important. I think the other thing that when you're thinking about a mentor, they have to be willing to tell you things that nobody else would. So we say you have that conversation, you do that walk around the building. Come here, kid. Let's take a walk around the building here.
Figuring out where you're weak, and then specifically finding people that can strengthen you, make you better at that particular skill set. Like for me, copywriting, marketing is one of my struggles. So finding people who can push me in the marketing side, the promotion side, would be very beneficial. And for people that are listening, you have your own areas of weakness. And so finding people that can shore up those, super beneficial.
You could almost have a discussion sometime about, the whole concept of mentoring. I kind of put it into three quick buckets, if it's possible. And there's the very tangible skills that you need, right? So for example, to your point, marketing and sales and those kinds of things. Those are very tangible things that you probably could either get that in a classroom setting. You could get that from going online and finding people who do that for a living. Maybe like we do leadership training all the time, those kinds of things. There's the inventory that you do of your kind of moral compass or your ethical compass. And I think that's so important as well. Who are you? I say there's three questions you have to ask yourself. Who am I? What do I stand for? What would I compromise? I think that's your kind of moral, ethical compass. Then I think the mentoring to me is those intangibles. Those are the way you deal with people, the way you look at a problem and try to solve that problem. And to me, that's where that mentor is, that person that kind of puts his or her arm around you and says, come here, let's talk about this. I mean, what were your thought processes here? That's a much different relationship, I think, than someone who you're reaching out to. And think about a golfer, right? I mean, a golfer could go to a swing pro and then they're helping them understand the swing and the plane and those kinds of things. But the mentor is really the person that kind of walks the course with them and says, okay, you're 2 strokes down from the lead and you're on hole number 15. This is the mental way to do it. This is how you handle yourself. This is how you take that deep breath at that appropriate moment, because those are the intangible things, right? I always say that some of the best leaders are the ones that play the hands are dealt the best way. Well, the mentor helps you through how do you play that hand the best way. I'm going to get dealt certain hands in life. I'm going to get dealt certain hands as a leader. How do I play that hand? It's not mechanical anymore. It's the feel, right? You know what I mean? People say, oh, it's what's in your gut. And how often do you do that?
In poker, I always challenge my students because they'll ask very general, broad questions like, should I ever do this? And the answer is, I don't know. Like, there are times when you do it and there are times when you don't. And it just depends on the information that you have and the data. Right. People want easy answers and heuristics to apply broadly across the board. But, that's just not real life. That you take the information that you have and maybe one time you do one thing and it's totally appropriate. And another time you do something else. And that's also totally appropriate. It's a case by case.
See, but that's where, now, if you take that example, Brad, that to me is mentoring, right? Because a lot of people could do the educational piece of saying, okay, well, 92% of the time when you're dealt this hand, this is the way you play it, right? So that's sort of the clinical educational side of things. And that there's nothing wrong with that. That's very good. But the mentoring side is what you just said. Okay, well, you know what? You're going to have to go with your gut, or you're going to have to look at that hand and based on the way things are going for that day. And if it doesn't work out, then that's when the mentor-mentee kind of relationship happens where, hey, Brad, I played this hand this way. It didn't work out. Knowing what I know today, I think I would have done it that way. That's when you as a mentor say, okay, okay, you're seeing it now. And by the way, you're not always going to be right. There's going to be those situations where you played it to the best you could. And you know what? The person next to you took a card when they probably shouldn't have taken a card or something like that. You know what I mean?
Sometimes you can make the best possible decisions and still get a poor outcome.
Right.
That's
exactly right.
Circumstances beyond your control. You really have to be at peace with making the best decision you possibly can and then accept the results and just move forward.
And that's when the mentor, I think, really serves in their best role. Part of what you do in your career, especially on a difficult time in your career, is you're building your red badges of courage. At my age and my tenure at over 40 years of business, you have all these red badges of courage where someone says to you, "Oh, this situation happens. How should I handle it?" Well, unfortunately or fortunately, you have 4 or 5 instances where it's happened. I mean, that's what experience does for you. And that's when you are the best as a mentor, when you're saying, look, Brad, I can think of 2 or 3 instances, one where it worked out well, one where it didn't, and one where, it just kind of stuck there in the middle and it wasn't great or bad. And this is the outcome afterwards. This is how I handled myself afterwards. To your point, I played that the best hand I could possibly play it. You think about baseball, you were talking about playing baseball. There's sometimes that you hit that ball perfectly and it goes right to the shortstop. And there's other times you hit a bloop and it finds a hole and you're like, that was a terrible swing. It was an inside out swing. I got handcuffed, but I got it. I muscled it out to the outfield, and on the scorecard, it's a single. I mean, so they're going to have those situations. It speaks to your character of how do you handle the 0 for 3 when you hit the ball right on all 3 times, but right to a fielder. It's how you handle that character. And that's where the mentor helps you because they've had that experience.
You get a trusted feedback mechanism.
Right. And, I think through the individuals who I look to as mentors and people that I listened to and kind of looked at and admired the way they went about their routines, they had failure, they had successes, and they had sometimes when, it was just good, but it wasn't great or bad kind of idea. And just playing golf, there's sometimes you hit some great balls, but you score bad. It's like, how did this happen? I thought I played a lot better than this scorecard says it does. And then sometimes you're having these shots all over the place and you're just getting lucky, you know what I mean? So it's just, you have to be able to balance through all that stuff. And I think a mentor can really help you through that part of it because they have the experience to say, hey, look, I've been there, done that. Just take a deep breath. It's going to get better.
If somebody out there wants to contract or wants to get a contract or collaborate with a large company like a UPS, firstly, how should they go about getting their attention and getting a seat at the table?
Well, I think it starts with you understanding what it is that you're trying to accomplish. I think you have to have the confidence that you can't go in saying, well, it's a $50 billion company and I'm just a small organization. You have something there that's important. It's your business and your business is sacred to you. it allows you then to get that seat at the table by having your facts. I mean, you need to go to these meetings or set up a meeting with an account executive potentially and say, hey, look, I've got this piece of business. I really could use your help. By you being prepared and kind of given some vision as to what you're trying to accomplish as an organization and be right up front with it, I think allows you then to allow the corporation to say, okay, well, I see something here. It's almost kind of like, that TV show Shark Tank. You have to go in prepared. You have to have the confidence. You can't be overconfident, but you have to be prepared. That's number one. Number two is I think that, sometimes small businesses are apologizing for their size or, hey, we're just a small business. And I know it happens a lot of times when they're recruiting talent. I got to recruit against Amazon or Google or Apple. Who's going to want to work for me? No, I think don't ever apologize for being a small business. I mean, that's exciting that you're a small business. And I think, think about it. Do you think Jeff Bezos walking around every warehouse in Amazon saying hello to everybody? No. But you can as the owner of a business. And so you'll never be undercover boss as a small business owner. So that's a good thing. And I think if you think about the internet allows that small business to feel like a big business. Because when you look at a website, Brad, you don't know how big or small that company is, right? It's if you build a world-class website and a world-class e-commerce site, you could be working out of the basement of my house selling something. Nobody knows that. And so the internet allows a small business to feel big, but it also allows the big business, if they do it right, to feel small. So I think that's what's important. And I think it starts with your ability to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. You have a good business plan. You have a good view of what you want to do. And then you think through that. I mean, I give you my example that I grew up with was Gateway 2000. Everybody had a cow box and a computer. I guess I'm showing my age some years ago. But there was a company started out of a barn in South Dakota that, we were willing to listen to, right? And our competitor at the time said, hey, you're a very rural area. We're not going to come pick you up in this barn, And for us, we were like, yeah, this is great. We can help a company grow and develop. And, small business is the backbone of our country. And so we took advantage of that. Now, later on, ironically, when they grew to be the very large corporation that everybody knew and everybody had a cow box and everybody was buying Gateway 2000 computers at that time. Well, every time our competitor went in and tried to win that business, the owner said, wait a minute, when I needed you, when I was a small business out of a barn here in South Dakota, you wanted nothing to do with me. Now that I'm this large, huge corporation, there's something to be said for the way you conduct yourself and the way you give your vision to a large organization that's going to want them to want to be want them to want to be one of the sharks that support you, that kind of idea.
Let's take a second and imagine that you're 20 years old. You still have the business experience and wisdom that you've gained over your career. What are you going to focus your time and energy doing today if you're just starting out?
The thing that I think a lot about is those companies that started out and were just global brands, for example, or very successful organizations. I always say the first 100 years doesn't guarantee the second 100 years of a company. And so those companies did things and got first to market or got that spot, but then lost it for whatever reason. And to me, it seems like those things always end up coming back. So who are those brands or who are those companies? The example I give you is, I think it was a 107-year anniversary of the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Sears said, we're no longer going to have a catalog. Nobody buys from catalogs. Brad, if you went out to your mailbox in a little while, there's probably 10 catalogs in there right now. A, it's not that people don't buy from catalogs. And B, the catalog that everybody buys from is the internet catalog, which is Amazon. So isn't Amazon really the Sears and Roebuck of today? I mean, if you think about it, right? So how does that come back around again? And I think Amazon is starting to move towards maybe a little bit back to brick and mortar, where someday they're going to be telling you, hey, we got warehouses all over and there's a warehouse close to you. Why don't you come pick up, for example, at the Whole Foods that they bought, probably they'll be telling you, hey, you can come pick it up at Whole Foods. And so it won't be brick and mortar the way we know. But so I look at these companies or Woolworths, hey, nobody wants a 5 and dime on their 106-year anniversary or whatever. They closed the Woolworths. Well, I don't know. There's a Dollar Tree store in every corner. There's an Under 5 on every corner. There's a Dollar General everywhere. So it's not that Woolworths, people, they lost their way. And so, but it seems like things come back around again. So for me, the answer to your question would be, what were those great ideas that were first to market, that everybody loved and kind of knew as a world-class brand, that went out of business, but maybe it's coming back out around again. And can I be, and so I always find those things to be very, very, very interesting, because their thoughts and their concepts were good. Do you think AOL thought 10 years ago that they would, AOL wouldn't be everyone's email address right now instead of being Gmail, right? So somehow they got to that spot quick. Everybody had an AOL account at one time, and now nobody has one probably, or very few people have one, to the degree there's who thought Yahoo wouldn't be Yahoo, right? So those are all, but their concepts were good. And or the last one I'd give you real quick is I gave you that Gateway 2000. Well, there was a period of time where there was over 400 Gateway 2000 country stores, they called them. And so they weren't working, and they closed them all. And if you think about it, they said, well, nobody really wants to go into a country store or go into a store and buy a computer. Well, think about it. Doesn't Apple do that today? And you can't even get in an Apple store when there's a new release. Well, it's because in a Gateway country store, you couldn't buy the computer. You went in, you played with it, you touched it, you built your computer, but then you went online and ordered it. Well, today, if you and I walk into an Apple store and we find something we like, we buy it immediately, right? The person's there with a swipe card, right? So I think that it's those kinds of concepts that were good concepts then. They're still good concepts today. It's just, how do you kind of understand where the puck's going, not to where the puck's been, and how do you? So that's what I would spend my time on. I think about it all the time. I think personally, I'll give you my latest one I've been thinking about. I think, as crazy as this sounds, doctors will be back to doing house calls.
Why do you think that?
You get a doctor who's retired and, wants to do still loves the profession of being a doctor. You have Brad and Rock, we'll just use you and I as examples so we don't insult anyone. Or, Brad and I are, our deductible is $3,000 a year. So we're paying literally for our healthcare. Even though we are on a healthcare plan, we may have a deductible of $3,000 to $5,000. So that means when we go to a doctor, we're going to pay for that visit. So if I call up a doc and say, hey, doc, my son's not feeling well, I think it's an ear infection. Doctor comes over for a house call, says, hey, it's $75. Well, I'm going to pay you the $75. I'm going to pay a doctor I'm going to go drive to. Why not do that? And so you set up this network of doctors that were, maybe retired, maybe 1099s that love the profession, and maybe want to work 2 or 3 days a week, but are willing to make the house calls. And so and I think you didn't have to worry about insurance. I mean, because most people are paying it anyway. So I just think that that's something that will be interesting. I do think you could set up a network of docs that want to just make house calls.
Effectively, you're cutting out the insurance aspect of it, because you have a deductible anyway.
Well, I'm not cutting out the insurance part of it. What I'm cutting out is the people saying, oh, you know what, I want to go to an office. Well, there are certain things you probably have to go to an office for. But if you think about it, if you're willing to do a doc in a box, somebody on a phone call or somebody on an internet doing it for you, most people, go online and check things out. Well, if I call, if you had a sick child or you weren't feeling good or you hurt your knee playing baseball in an adult league, and you call up a doc and he comes over and for $75. So the doctor's not arguing with the insurance side that, net they're going to get $10 to copay basically. The patient says, well, look, you know what? In the past I was only paying my copay, but now I'm paying it all because of my deductible. So it becomes this win-win for both parties. So to answer your question, knowing what I know today, if I was younger, these are the things I think about. Like, I think something like that may come back again, as crazy as that sounds.
At CVS Pharmacy, they do have a program where they have a nurse, but you can sign up online, show up, and it's basically for like cold type situations or allergies, things that you don't necessarily need a doctor for. Right. And they can prescribe antibiotics and stuff like that. So I think it's like $100 to show up and have the nurse just talk to a nurse, get the antibiotics and move on. So cutting out the hospital waiting room hours, and that's a multi-billion-dollar business.
Well, and even you think about it, I mean, you think about you're not feeling well or your knees really hurt. You're not that's bad where you're going to call an ambulance. You got to find someone to take you to the doctor. You shouldn't be driving, but you do anyway because you got to get to the doctor, where if you knew the docs that were willing to do house calls, you would say, hey, you know what? this is great. I'm in my house. You come show up, boom, So I think that there's something to be, but these are the things I think about to your question that
Yeah.
knowing what I know today. And as I've seen businesses over the years come full circle, you're thinking to yourself, wow, is that something with today's healthcare and the way is today? Can I get back to that personal care again, to where I feel pretty good about the fact? Because think about it. I mean, most people don't even have the same doctor for a lifetime, you know what I mean? Or the same doctor, because we're so transient, we're moving around, we're in different places. And because I think the other thing is, because of the way healthcare is going now and that people are paying so much for their healthcare, they're becoming consumers rather than patients. Okay, well, how much is that MRI going to cost me? And is there a cheaper place for me to go for the MRI? Because I'm paying for most of the MRI. So then therefore, is that X-ray physician technician, is that X-ray place cheaper than the other X-ray place?
Or is it necessary at all?
Yeah, right. It's the kind of idea. So anyway, so that long-winded answering your question, but I do think there are those kinds of things that kind of come full circle. It doesn't always have to be the late, something that's not even on the board today. Sometimes there's some pretty good ideas that just kind of recycle themselves.
Can you tell me about a typical morning routine for you? As far as remaining productive, health-wise, those types of things. What time do you wake up? What time do you go to sleep?
I'm usually like 11 to 12 kind of guy that finally falls asleep. And I'm usually up 6 o'clock in the morning. When I was working a more consistent routine, I was at 5 o'clock in the morning up sitting at my desk by 6:30. I usually take that time to check my emails. For me now that you could argue semi-retired, but doing the consulting, doing the keynote speaking and leadership training, that's the 3 legs of our stool in our company, 360. When I'm not doing those things, I'm still up by 6. I like to read the paper in the morning. I do read it from back to front, I guess. I read the sports first and kind of go forward. And then, I like to do that, have a cup of coffee with Deb, and we sit and talk and, kind of chat. And then I like to work out in the middle of the afternoon. It's weird. Like when we're down the shore, I go for a bike ride or a run, and she thinks I'm nuts because it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I like the old school, because of my age, if you're sweating, you must be doing good things. But I like doing that. So the run gives me a chance to think through things. And, I try to either run or bike 2, 3, 4 times a week, depending on what's going on. And I like to stay active and involved. I mean, for me, the consulting, the keynote speaking, and the leadership training really gives me the chance to meet some really wonderful people and some creative people. As you travel around and do the keynote speaking, you really get a chance to meet some interesting people. And so for me, it's a two-way street. I feel like, helping them and what they're trying to accomplish, for example, in a conference, but they're also helping me because I'm meeting different people. They've got different views. They're looking at things differently. So it kind of keeps my mind, young and current, I guess.
What about diet and supplements? I guess, first of all, what does your diet look like? And second of all, do you take any supplements throughout your day?
No, I'm not really a supplement person. I mean, I'm whatever vitamins the doctor tells me that, based on my last blood test or whatever. I've got my shared cholesterol problem, so I kind of watch that. But I'm a kind of basic eater. I'm grilled chicken first, and then maybe a burger or steak. I'm not really a big red meat person, so that's always kind of helped me. And I'm not a big eater. My problem is I graze a little bit, but I probably haven't been more than 10 pounds higher or lower than I've probably been since I've been in college. So I've been fortunate for that. I think the working out helps me out a little bit. I've had some period of time where maybe 10, 15 higher than I wanted to be, and then sometime a little bit lower, but I'm right in that range all the time. So I just try to stay active, and it's weird. I'm not driven by food. It drives people crazy. I mean, I could spend all day without eating because I'm busy and look up and say, it's 5 o'clock. I didn't even eat today. So kind of idea. But I try to, for me, my biggest issue health-wise is cholesterol. I got to keep an eye on my cholesterol. So
what's something that you see people waste a lot of time on, time and resources, that doesn't give them much ROI?
The things that they can't change, so, a perfect example would be, you're working for someone who is not asking you to do anything illegal or immoral or unethical, but you don't like their style. Well, you know what? You're not changing them. I mean, you either have to decide to move on or understand that someday when you get in that position, you've got a right to run things the way you see fit. As long as you're not asking someone to violate a policy, break a law, or do something unethical, it's your right as a leader to go do those things. And so I see people all the time, just laboring over how they're going to change this or change that or change that. You're not going to change that person. It's like I tell people all the time. I was at UPS for 36 years. I didn't agree with everything that happened at UPS. I didn't disagree enough to leave. Never asked me to violate a policy, never asked me to do anything unethical, and never asked me to do anything immoral. Now, did I agree with everything? No, of course not. Did I have moments where I was frustrated and angry? Yes. But then by the next day, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm evaluating a style more than I am, what they're asking me to do. So I've got to put that behind me. And so I think that people waste so much time on the style of something, or, hey, I'm going to try to, you're not changing them. The same way when you get in that role as a leader, you have the right to run things. Now, you may not be effective. That's a different issue. But to sit there and try to say, well, I don't like the way Brad does this, or I don't like the way Brad, how many times do you hear people say, oh, I don't like the way they do this, or every Monday they want to have a Monday morning meeting. I think that's ridiculous. Okay, but that's their right to have that Monday morning meeting. If you're that unhappy, either quit, or when you get to be that leader, don't have a Monday morning meeting. Right? But people waste all this time trying to, and you're just wasting energy. I mean, I look at it this way. When I'm sitting in the meeting and we're making a decision, and I can think of a couple ones in my mind as, when I was a CEO of Unitek, I mean, when the board told me this is what we'd like to do, I may not have agreed. We had the meeting. We all voiced our opinion. But then once they told me, okay, this is where we're going, to me, it's yes or no, sir, 3 bags full. Let's go. Once we all agreed, you didn't ask me to break a law, you didn't ask me to violate a policy, you didn't ask me to do anything unethical. Okay, well then I'm wasting no time trying to change your mind. I got it. You let me voice my opinion. If I couldn't change your mind at that point, what am I going to do? Spend all my time trying to change your mind when I could be spending all my time trying to execute on behalf of the organization and get the organization. Do I think the goal was the right goal? Yes. But I don't like the way you want me to go about doing it. Well, you know what? Well, why don't I just get to the goal? Celebrate successes and everybody leaves you alone, right? I think that's the problem with organizations. People just spend so much time trying to change a style or an opinion. And now, if they ask me to do something unethical, immoral, or illegal, I'm out. I don't need to ruin my reputation. But if they're not, then I got to decide. I'm always going to run into that no matter where I go. So I guess I'm going to spend my whole life changing jobs, I guess.
So do you find yourself rereading any specific books on leadership? And if so, which ones?
So for me, I'm a huge fan of Coach Wooden. I had the distinct pleasure and opportunity, and probably one of the highlights of my career was I spent 4 hours with Coach Wooden. And so at that point, I think he was 89. He's since passed. I think he'd be 108 this year. But Coach Wooden, legendary UCLA basketball coach, was just a wonderful human being, thoughtful individual. And in fact, if you go to my website, www, 60 management services, I actually have the video of my interview with him. So nice. It's about an hour interview. So if you get a chance, check that out, because it's just a great, and it's timeless. It's I think it was 1999 is when I did the interview with him. So I would read. I love his readings. I love the things that he said. I love his pyramid of success. And so I would say Coach Wooden. If not Coach Wooden, there's a gentleman, Dennis Snow, who wrote a book, Lessons from the Mouse. Excellent book. I quote him often. I've met Dennis. I've heard him speak. Just an excellent person. And so that's another great book. Of course, selfishly, I would say Tighten the Lug Nuts is a great book, because I feel like it's a book written from the heart. So that's a good. But Dennis Snow's Lessons from the Mouse is excellent. Quote it, use it all the time. And then Coach John Wooden, it's amazing the things that he talked about and how he talks about them. And so that's a great. And like I said, if you get a chance, take a look at the interview. He talks about that real quick. I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was one of his greatest players, and of course in those days he was Lou Alcindor. And he has this conversation with them because he feels like he's not really working in a team atmosphere. And so he looks at him one day and says to him, you may be the engine that runs this car, but without those four wheels, this car is not going anywhere. And so to me, that always really stuck with me. It's such a simple analogy. It made all the sense in the world that, I've got to be part of a team, and I may be the quarterback or I may be the best player on the team, but without the rest of the team feeling good about me, I'm never, I'm not going to win any games. And so that's the kind of way he talked about things in such a simple but profound way. So I think Coach Wooden has some great lessons in his books.
So in the field of leadership, what's something that's commonly accepted as the truth that you disagree with?
I think people make the statement that, people are our greatest asset, but they don't treat their people that way. I think that's probably one that always drives me crazy, is that, people talk about, leaders will talk about how important their people are, but yet the first time things get tight in the organization, the first thing they cut out is training. I mean, what kind of message does that send, that your people are your most important asset, but, companies strive to be the employer of choice, yet, may not have the greatest safety frequencies in the world. So I think that, I do believe that people are your most important asset. I think what differentiates companies from other company or its people, the brand promise is executed through your people. No matter how much technology is out there today, it's going to be an individual who, executes that, whether it's picking an order in a warehouse, whether it's delivering the package, whether it's someone on the phone, you have a service disconnect, and that individual on the phone, how do they handle that service disconnect? So I think that to me, people are your most important assets. I think people say that all the time, but many times do not live up to that, aspirational goal of treating your people with dignity and respect. So I think that to me is one that always frustrates me, is that, people say that, but they don't live it. So,
talk a big game and then don't follow through on their actions.
Yeah, I mean, I think profit is a result of people doing the right things, working hard, and, you having good processes in place that allow people to be successful. I think about some of the best sports teams and some of the players who maybe are on one team and they struggle, and then they move to another team and they're doing so much better. And I think it's just because the team and the coaches put them in a position to be successful, right? It sometimes, it really comes down to, do you put your people in a position to be successful? And if you do, and you give them the opportunity to be successful, generally they will be successful. And so as an organization, as a business, are you putting your people in a place to be successful? And sometimes it's the amount of training you give them. I think you have to believe in your people at times until they're ready to believe in themselves. And if you're not willing to do that little bit extra, to have that belief in them, then they may struggle. And the result may be you look at them and say, well, maybe Brad's not as good as we thought he or she was. Well, wait a second. Did you believe in them until they're ready to believe in themselves?
Thank you, sir. I know you're a busy man and you got things to do. So final question, where can my listeners find you on the interwebs?
Well, thanks, Brad. So we are on the web, www.3 and then the word 60managementservices.com. Very interactive website. I'm really proud of the way we've kind of come a long way with the amount of information that's on there. So there's a section on my latest podcast, which when ours goes live, I'll make sure I put that up on there. And there's the other podcasts I've done. There's a way for you to order the book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, which I think it turned out to be, look, when you start writing a book, you're very nervous. You look at the piece of paper for about 3 or 4 days, wondering, is anybody going to read this book? Is anybody going to want to buy this book? And I think the book was written both in a storytelling way, but also a way at the end of each chapter, there are lessons. So there's some great lessons in there, some things that I've learned from both people who've worked with me and helped me along the way and experiences that I've had. You can buy the book at Amazon online, but also on our website. And then, of course, my email is rockyromanella@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, 360 Management Services, Facebook, 360 Management Services, and Twitter as well. So we've got all the social media, but the website's the easiest and best way for an interactive conversation between myself and any questions that someone may have, or to see. So, like I said, the John Wooden interview, Coach Wooden interview, is on the web under Coach's Corner. So we have the different buckets: Coach's Corner, podcast, about the book, latest news on things that we're doing. So I had a Forbes magazine article that's up there that I was interviewed for, and a couple others. So it's some interesting stuff on the website.
I'll be sure to link to the website on the show page.
Well, thank you, Brad.
Rocky, thanks for your time. I'm super grateful for your insight, wisdom. It was a real pleasure talking to you. Have a great day, sir.
You too, Brad.